Thank you. Greetings, everyone. I'm Susie Clark, the director of the Mahindra Humanities Center and the Morton B. Knoffel Professor of Music here at Harvard University. Welcome to tonight's event featuring Margaret Atwood in conversation with Scott Tong. Tonight's program is a collaboration between the Harvard Bookstore and the Writers Speak series at the Mahindra Humanities Center. The Mahindra Writers Speak series brings significant contemporary writers to speak on campus with the intention of fostering literary conversation. It is convened by Duncan White, who is Associate Director of General Education here at Harvard University. I'm grateful to Duncan for his dedication to the Writers Speak series, and in particular, for putting together today's event. I'm also grateful to Steve Beal, the Executive Director of the Mahindra Humanities Center, and Mary McKinnon, the Events Coordinator, as well as the rest of the outstanding team at the Mahindra Center. And I'm absolutely thrilled that the Mahindra Center has this opportunity to collaborate with the Harvard Bookstore. It is located, as I'm sure many of you know, and if you don't, you should know, it's located on 1256 Mass Ave, and it is locally owned and independently run. I absolutely love the Harvard Bookstore. And if you are And if you are anything like me, going into the store is always a wonderful educational experience. My favorite section inside the store is the staff book choices. And anytime I'm passing by, even if I'm in a hurry, I always have to pause to see what's in the new in hardback window or the new in paperback window. And in fact, when I walked past on my way home at about 10 p.m. last night, I saw Margaret Atwood's new book in the window, and that filled me with anticipation and excitement for tonight's event. So today we celebrate Margaret Atwood's collection of short stories, Old Babes in the Wood, which is hot off the press, newly on the Harvard Bookstore shelves and in the window, and indeed newly in your possession. And so now I will hand this mic over to Casey Riva, who is the Director of Events at the Harvard Bookstore, who will introduce Margaret Atwood and Scott Tong. Please join me in welcoming her, and I hope you enjoy this evening. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're so delighted to have you here tonight. My name is Cassie Riva. I'm the Director of Events at Harvard Bookstore. On behalf of the store, I'm very pleased to welcome you to tonight's program. And I just want to thank our friends at the Mahindra Humanities Center here at Harvard for helping to make this event possible, our wonderful ASL interpreters, and and the lovely folks at Sanders Theater for allowing us to use this gorgeous venue. Real quickly, all of the copies of Old Babes in the Wood have been signed. Margaret came by earlier at the store and signed away her life. So you guys could all have signed copies. We have additional signed copies for sale in the lobby. We also have some of her backlist titles. There is no signing after this event. So once it's over, you're going to just stay in your seats for a few minutes, and then we're going to release you. And you can either purchase copies or you can head out. And lastly, I just want to say thank you for buying books from Harvard Bookstore. Your purchases support our award-winning author series and help ensure the future of a local independent bookstore, so thank you. And now I'm thrilled to introduce tonight's speakers. Margaret Atwood is the legendary author of more than 50 books. Her 1985 classic, The Handmaid's Tale, of which the popular Hulu series is based, was followed in 2019 by a sequel, The Testaments, which was a global #1 bestseller and won the Booker Prize. Atwood has won numerous awards over the years, including the Arthur C. Clarke Award for Imagination and Service to Society, the PEN USA Lifetime Achievement Award, and the Dayton Literary Peace Prize, among many, many others. In 2019, she was made a member of the Order of the Companions of Honor for her services to literature. She's also worked as a cartoonist, illustrator, playwright, puppeteer, and is remarkably good at using a flamethrower. Tonight, she will discuss Old Babes in the Wood, her dazzling new short story collection. In a rave review from Publishers Weekly, they say Atwood explores love and loss in this brilliant collection that mixes fantastical stories about the afterlife with realism. She's writing at the top of her considerable powers. Joining her tonight in conversation is Scott Tong, co-host of Here and Now on WBUR Boston Public Radio and author of A Village with My Name. So now, please join me in welcoming Margaret Atwood and Scott Tong.
Well, many years ago,
They love you.
when that's right. Many years ago, when I got engaged, a colleague of mine, Dave Molosky, said, "Can I give you 2 pieces of advice?" And he said, number 1, if your fiance starts complaining about her family, don't chime in. And he said, number 2, you are just a prop. So I know my job here tonight is to be the on-ramp for you all to hear from Margaret Atwood. A little sneak peek, we spoke earlier today at WBUR for an interview that will air on our show on Here and Now. And she did sneak in at the end. You snuck in that you do watch, I don't remember your word, trash TV or something of that sort. So if we're nice to her tonight, maybe we'll get some additional details of that. I first want to actually engage the audience a little bit to just get a sense. I think we can see somewhat, you out there. How many of you have watched the Hulu show? Okay, that looks like a good, I don't know, maybe half or so. How many of you have read The Handmaid's Tale? Way more than half. Okay, how many have read The Testaments, the sequel? Good number. We're at Harvard here. And how many of you know the significance of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Gilead? Well, that's where we'll start.
Oh, naughty. All right. Yes, Harvard was not amused when this book was first published. The Handmaid's Tale, they were not amused. They did not think it was fun to have bodies hanging on the Harvard wall or the Secret Service in Widener Library. They took a dim view, but they have come round since.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't let me in here. This isn't Florida. Hey.
We have choice words for Florida in our interview as well. Before we came on, you were talking about how you came back to Cambridge as you were researching The Handmaid's Tale. Maybe just tell us about this place and how it relates to Gilead.
Well, yes, every single building in The Handmaid's Tale is a building in this area. And I particularly came back when I was writing the Testaments to make sure that if you stood on point A in the yard, that you could actually see what the character is seeing from that point. Because you know that if you don't get that right, somebody's going to call you on it. It will not any longer be a letter you receive in the mail with blue and red crayons and underlining capital letters. It'll be someone shrieking at you on the internet. You can't see Widener Library from there, you idiot. Like that. Yeah, so you have to check everything.
Yeah, I understand. Well, we have some of your questions that we'll get to later. We'll certainly talk about The Handmaid's Tale. But let's talk about your new book of short stories, Old Babes in the Wood, and another advertisement. They'll be for sale after this is done. These, and we talked about short stories, these are concentrated episodes of life and death and memory and time passing, and it's punctuated by the Margaret Atwood wit and fun all the way throughout. Many of your books are known for looking forward in time to what the future, what a dystopian future might bring. Does this one have a little bit more looking back?
Well, yes, I think you could say that quite safely. Or let us say that at a certain age, it's a lot easier to do that than it is when you're 20. You know, you've got more scope, shall we say. So it always quite amazes me when I see a memoir written by somebody who's 30. I think, what? There's more.
No, I'm a consultant. I give advice, I know. Well, I guess speaking of kind of looking back in the passage of time, in this series of short stories, you have two characters who you've introduced to readers in the past from a previous book in 2004, Tig and Nell, a fictional couple. And in some of these stories,
They bear a fairly close resemblance to me and Graham, yes. Let's cut to the chase here. Yes. Did I really take St. John's Amulet's first aid course? Yes, I did.
oh, that's the first story.
I know.
Taking
That's the
CPR.
start of that,
Well,
yeah.
Tig and Nell are not very good at it. Were you any good at it?
Let's find out.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I'm really, really, really good at remembering to call 911. I'm good at that. Yes. And I can say, stand back, give them room. I can do that part. Yeah.
This book is dedicated to your late husband, Graham. Can you talk a little bit more of what of your relationship is in here?
Well, you're just going to have to read the stories, dear.
Which you've already done. Yes, so various episodes. I think at the beginning, so that we've got Tig and Nell for 3 stories, and then we have some less usual types of stories.
Mm-hmm.
So the interview with George Orwell via a medium, and
I do want to ask about that one.
England was very pleased about that. They wanted to know what he had to say. So there's that one. There's one in which the soul of a snail finds itself in a female human being. It's challenging. Challenging.
Yeah.
I have different ideas from people. And I got a chance to redo the story called Patient Griselda, which is the last story in Boccaccio's Decameron, but this very, very patient wife with a sadistic, evil husband. I've always been very annoyed by that story because this woman was held up as the model of what wives should be. So I've contrived a different ending for him. And this is a story narrated by an intergalactic alien who is on an entertainment mission for people holed up due to COVID. He's there to entertain them, he or it, we're not sure.
And the Decameron was also written, was it not, during the Black Death?
Yes, the frame story is that a bunch of young people, his relations have all died, go off to a country house and entertain one another to take the edge off by taking turns telling stories. And it is a great storybook source. You know, it's one of the wonderful source books for stories. Chaucer used it, for instance.
Canterbury Tales.
He used some stuff from the Decameron there.
Yeah, is it the Pardoner's Tale that directly references
Oh
one
my
of
goodness.
the pandemic?
Wow.
Okay, I get 1 point here
Did
for
you
that.
look that up ahead of time?
Preparation. I want you to tell us a story. We asked you to read this for our interview earlier today, but a great moment when Tig and Nell are out of the country, and they learn from Nell's sister that their cat has died. You don't have to read that section. I would like you to read another section later, but what's happening there?
Well, this is a beloved cat, so more beloved by Nell than by Tig. And she is rewriting Tennyson's Mort d'Arthur with cats in it because she finds it therapeutic. So King Arthur is the dead cat, and then all of the surrounding characters. So Sir Bedivere becomes Sir Catavere, and it all rhymes and
It's a quick read.
it all rhymes and scans. Yes.
Yep.
But that at the end, well, I'm not going to tell you what happens at the end. Yes.
Oh, what-
Anyway, Tennyson really knew his depth. The Victorians were very good at death, I think possibly because so many of them died right and left. But he was very good at poetry about that. I once read the Mort d'Arthur to a couple of hardened 21st century people in my kitchen, and I made them cry. But that was Tennyson making them cry. He's just really good at it.
So Tennyson is infused in this short story, and then there's also the dead
I
cat
studied
in the-
Tennyson in this very, not in this very theater, but in this very area, because I was a graduate student in Victorian studies here.
Mhm.
That's what I was doing in Widener Library when I wasn't reading Witchcraft and Demonology, which is, it's down there.
And yet, in Margaret Atwood style, you managed to include the dead cat ending up in the freezer.
The dead cat did end up in the freezer. That's a detail from real life. Yeah, so the sister who is just ruined by this event because she has had to take the cat to the vet has decided that she is going to save the cat so that Nell can give it a proper funeral. So she wraps it up in red brocade and puts it in the freezer. I point out that it's her freezer, but she's got 2 roommates. It is unknown to me to this day whether she told them in advance. In amongst the sausages and hamburgers, there was a
Right.
very ceremonially arranged dead cat.
And Nell is on the phone from Ireland. Is,
Well, there's
is
a
she in
better
Ireland?
story
She's
about
like,
a
"What, is
freezer
the
with
cat
a-"
right next to the
Yeah.
hamburgers in the freezer?
Yeah. There's a really good story about a freezer, not mine. I used to, talking about trashy TV, in England, you could get these books called True Crimes. Now, they were only the true crimes of people who had been found out, I hasten to point out. So they're often quite stupid. And one group of people had put their dead granny in the freezer and said that she'd gone to Florida or somewhere like that. And so they could continue to collect her pension. They hadn't murdered her. They had just frozen her. I'm not giving anybody any ideas.
Yeah. Can I ask you to do a little reading? Maybe I can read with you. This is the interview with the late George Orwell.
So this is part of a series called The Dead Interview. It's run by a magazine called Inque, I-N-Q-U-E, and writers who are still alive are asked to pick a dead writer of their choice and interview them. So I get to interview George Orwell, something I've always wanted to do.
And the connection isn't great. You talk about that, right?
She's a medium.
Yeah. So
In a trance. I mean, how else could you do this? And I'm happy to tell you that he is allowed to smoke in the afterlife because you can hear him coughing.
he's
And
hacking.
he is, yeah. He should never have done it. He had bad lungs, but he was a demon smoker.
Can we go to page 84? And maybe you can read you, and whew, I'll be George Orwell.
Oh. Uh-huh.
Yeah, right.
I have dramatic inclinations, all right. Where would you like to start?
How about so this is you asking the questions at the top of 84.
Yes. And I will say, top of 84, you'll be interested to know that the rewriting of history is still being attempted, especially in the United States.
I'm not surprised. The way they tried to paper over slavery, and then the Jim Crow laws. You can't have those kind of inequities in a democracy, if indeed that country is one, or ever was.
You're not going to do the English accent?
No, I've got public radio. I think that's all I've got in my locker.
Oh, you'd be amazed. Oh, no, well, there's a lot of different disinformation being spread about.
You'd be amazed at what people can be manipulated into believing.
Actually, it may be even worse than in your day. At least Stalin didn't try to push blue bird-shaped aliens from outer space.
Taking lessons from that old blowhard H.G. Wells, have they been?
Possibly his early fiction, but at least he believed in science, not like a lot of anti-vaxxers today.
Anti-what?
It's complicated.
And the rest will have to go through. It is delightful to read this. And can you talk about, and you mentioned this and you've talked about this, the influence George Orwell had on your writing?
Yeah, so that's why I chose him. So first of all, he ruined my child life because I read Animal Farm. You know, there it was, Animal Farm. I thought it was going to be like Wind in the Willows, Peter Rabbit, and then of course you're into it, and the pigs go to the bad side and they start behaving very badly indeed. And the worst part is when they send this faithful horse off to the glue factory, telling him he's going to a nice rest facility for faithful workers, but they're actually going to turn him into glue. And the other animals realize that, and they run down the road after the truck saying, "Come back, Baxter, come back." But he can't. Yes, I made Australians cry by reading that on the radio. It's hard to make Australians cry. Hardened cases.
Well, this passage refers to you talking to George Orwell about the rewriting of history. We're talking about that in this country right now, whether it's the rewriting of an election result or the teachings of African American history. How do you think about the public conversation today on that?
Which public conversation? There seem to be several of them. Yeah, some are pro, some are against. People have always rewritten history to a certain extent, of course, because they want the history to be favorable to their side, whatever that may be. And sometimes they just leave things out. So, for instance, in high school in the 50s in Canada, the Canadian history book was very, very boring. It was about wheat, because they hadn't put in any of the interesting things, because some of those things were disreputable. So they thought we child students of 17 or 18 were better off not knowing about them, I suppose. So I grew up thinking Canadian history was just boring. And then I found out stuff, right?
Your book, I read, has been banned by a county in my state of Virginia.
Oh, yes, well, that's not the only one.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it has a long history of being banned. And way back when I was putting together a book called In Other Worlds, which is about science fiction and related genres, I put in a letter that I had written to a school board in Texas, which at that time had banned it, but the students had all got together and they had debated it, and the students had won. They got it reinstated. So I went to some pains to point out that I'm sure the reason they banned it was they thought it was, quotes, anti-Christian. But it is not anti-Christian. It is anti the use of and the rewriting of Christianity as a tool of a totalitarianism. Not that that's ever happened before.
Is that the given reason in this newest chapter of your book being banned?
The newest,
what is the justification?
I think the justification is that it's got sex in it, unlike the Bible.
Wait, time out. There's sex in the Bible?
There is a lot of sex in the Bible, and there's also a lot of violence in the Bible. So if you want people not to be shocked, you must ban the Bible. It's a very shocking book, which is probably why it's held people's attention for so many years.
It's got good action in it. Totalitarianism, you have written about it, you have spoken about it, and about two levers of totalitarian states, two of many, I imagine, including control of the judiciary.
Oh, the way they get to be totalitarianism.
To enforce what they're trying to do, and to control the media.
Absolutely. So if you're going to do a decent coup, the first thing you have to do is get hold of the radio stations, the television stations, and the newspapers. I'm not advising you to do this. Yeah. So that's your first move, and your next move is to rearrange the judiciary so that the judges are essentially rubber stamping whatever it is that the government wants to do. And then, of course, you eliminate any independent artists that you can get your hands on. You either shoot them, exile them, or scare them enough so they run away very fast. So you don't want any of them in there.
Do you see any rhyming with what's happening in the United States right now?
You're not there yet, or we wouldn't be having this evening together.
We're still going so far, yeah.
We're still going so far. They have not eliminated you yet, and they're still letting me into the country. I have been banned from Russia.
Congratulations.
Yes, me and 99 other bad Canadians. We're not allowed into Russia at the moment.
You were in what was then, called Iron Curtain countries.
I was.
In the 80s when you were writing The Handmaid's Tale. Can you talk about what you saw then as you were thinking, as you were writing about it, and how that went into the construction of the story?
Yeah, so there's a lot of background in The Handmaid's Tale, and some of it is from that part of the world, some of it is from history going back, 3,000 years, and some of it in 1978, we went around the world, and because you could get a ticket like that, we were going to Australia, actually. We stopped in Iran 8 months before the Shah went down. And we stopped in Afghanistan 6 weeks before Daoud was assassinated. So we were some of the last people to see it before all of this war and destruction happened. So some of the background is that as well. What is it like in a country where women are not allowed to be seen? But the Iron Curtain stuff, it was East Germany. You probably remember a film called The Lives of Others.
Yep.
That was part of the atmosphere. It was pretty tight in East Germany. The next one was Czechoslovakia, and we were able to talk to people there, but only in a field, because it was assumed that a car, a room, a hotel, anything inside was going to be bugged, which it was. We needed a light bulb changed in our hotel room, and the bellman had said, It's in the chandelier. So we stood underneath the chandelier and said, we need a light bulb here. The light bulb has gone out. 2 minutes later, knock at the door, light bulb.
Thank you. Yeah.
And the next one was Poland, and Poland was much more wide open. So we were even in the Writers' Union, which was supposed to be a state organization, and our writer friend said, want some samizdat, which is forbidden literature. And we said, sure. They said, wait here a minute. They're keeping it on the premises to hand out, right? So things were much looser there, partly because there was a strong opposition, and that opposition was the Polish Catholic Church. And it was too big for them to kill everybody in it. And it was in a state of anger at the moment because a priest had just been found murdered in the trunk of a car. So there was a power struggle going on, and it was in Poland, as you will recall, that the cracks first appeared.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So very interesting to talk to people at that time, and they had to trust you quite a lot because you couldn't then go back to the West and say everything that you had heard and who had told you, because that would get them into very bad trouble.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me, I was based in China for a number of years, and the situation you describe of not being comfortable or being suspicious of anybody you talk to is, and this is back in 2009 in Xinjiang in the far west China where the minority Uyghurs are, and the only place that many people said was safe to speak was a cabbie inside his cab or somewhere in an outdoor market.
Outdoors.
Yeah, outdoor, and he said, do you have I don't want you to pull out your microphone, do you have a hidden microphone? I said, yeah. And I mean, it was that kind of environment. And I guess my question for you is, how much were those observations taken and used to describe Gilead?
Well, Gilead has the texture of any totalitarianism. It has different symbols and different clothing. And on the Central American model of you never pulled down a pyramid. If you wanted another pyramid, you built it on top of an existing one. So societies are like that. They build on top of an existing structure. They change the names, the symbols, and who's in charge, but it's a structure that people are familiar with. And the pyramid underneath the pyramid underneath the pyramid in this country is 17th century Puritanism. I can say that, land of my ancestors. They were 17th century Puritans in this area. So then you had the 18th century layered on top of that. You had the Enlightenment, you have the Revolution, you have the Declaration of Independence, you have all of that, but underneath it is this thing which then resurges in the 19th century as something called the Great Awakening. And this does tend to be cyclical, it does come back, but when it comes back, it's something that people are familiar with. So, yeah, you'll be very interested in a book called Red Memory, which I bet somebody's already sent you. It's coming out later this spring, and it's people talking about the Cultural Revolution, what it was like to live through that, various points of view, but it's clear that you can't have truth and reconciliation without truth, and you can't have truth if people aren't allowed to talk about it. So like that, it's a very interesting book.
So my parents, when they were very young, they got out of China just ahead of the communists, and many of their siblings were left behind, speaking of the Cultural Revolution. And when I was living there, I would talk to my uncles about the famine of the late 50s and eating tree bark to survive, and the Cultural Revolution. And the story he told me was because my uncle was connected to these ethnic Chinese on the outside. Worst of all in Taiwan, right? They were stained, politically stained.
Targeted.
And he would talk about what came upon his mother, because she didn't get out either. And she was forced in the winter to stand with her head down, and where the icicles would kind of drop down her neck. And she would stand there for hours. And in the course of just kind of researching my family history, I'd ask him more about this. And he didn't say too much about it. He's told that story, but that was kind of it. And I guess what I want to, coming back to your short stories, is I want to ask you about the value of telling these stories of memory and of mourning, because in many cultures, it's not really accepted. My uncle would say, I can talk about this a little bit, but what's the point? Why? Right? Practically speaking, it's not going to change anything. I mean, a lot of cultures kind of, that's the way they stop talking about it.
Well, especially if the regime, as is the case in China now, has decided that you shouldn't talk about it. There was an opening up period, and then things got out of hand. There was too much opening up, so then there was a closing down period. And that's what she talks about in Red Memory. Anyway, this is a whole other pretty fascinating conversation, and you probably have got your hands on a book called The World Turned Upside Down, which is about this thick, and it's a blow-by-blow, footnote-by-footnote account of what actually went on behind the scenes of the Cultural Revolution, like why Mao did it. What was he afraid of? And how
his power struggle, his return to
well, he was afraid
relevance.
that
Yep.
So Stalin had died, and there had been some de-Stalinification, and he was afraid that would happen to him. Maybe while he was still alive.
Let's go to some of your questions here. Stacy E. from Boston, Massachusetts asks, what are you reading now?
Oh, I never tell. Yeah, I kind of did tell, and then my publishers really freaked out. Don't talk about that. So here I am not talking about the memoir that I'm not supposed to be talking about.
You've not done a good job keeping a secret.
I have not. Well, they didn't tell me ahead of time that that's what they wanted, so I can't read their minds. They should be able to read mine, however.
That is what you're working on. How about what you're reading?
What am I reading? Well, there are several large piles of books. One of them is on the night table. One of them is on the floor. One of them is on the desk. One of them is on the other desk. One of them is downstairs in the kitchen. Which one of these piles would you like to talk about? There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Did you want some recos?
Yes.
Recommendations? I just gave you a couple.
Yes.
Yeah, I gave you a really good one, Red Memory, that's good. Yes, so what have I just finished reading? I read a book by Vincent Lamb, who is an emergency doctor and is now an addiction specialist. It's a novel, he is a novelist as well. And it's called On the Ravine. Very gripping and upsetting about the difficulties of treating people who are really addicted to various things. What's the best advice? Don't start. It's horrible. So I just finished that one. What else is going to be on the list? I've just got chemistry lessons. I think the author is coming, either it has just come through or is about to come through. Which is it? One or the other. Yes, anyway, that's pretty good and funny.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of Kelly Link. Do you know Kelly Link?
I don't.
Kelly Link writes very weird stories. And I think she has a fairly new collection that I'm about to get around to reading. Is that enough? Do you want me to tell you more history
I'm happy,
books?
yeah. Yes, no,
How many
Stacey, wherever
people
you are you good?
Interested in the French Revolution, anybody? Yes? Okay, then you'll want to read The Fall of Robespierre, which is 24 hours in the life of, at the beginning of which he has a head, and at the end of which he doesn't have a head. It was very sudden. Yeah, and it goes into why that happened. You know, why people turned against him, why they felt that he was, well, for the usual reason they were afraid he was going to send them to the guillotine next. And that was the same with the takedown of the Gang of Four. It was that kind of thing. The other people in the regime felt that they were going to be targeted by these people, so they decided to get in there first.
Yep.
So that's Fall of Robespierre, and then to be followed by any Napoleon fans?
Okay, you know what?
Yeah, I heard some little screams,
Yeah,
some little twitchings back there. Napoleon the Great. I'll tell you a really good Battle of Waterloo story if you're interested.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Duke of Wellington's second in command got shot in the leg. And if you got shot in the leg in those days, you had to have your leg amputated because the bullet would go in through your clothing, you would get germs, you would get infected, you would die of gangrene. So he said, "By gad, sir, I believe I've lost a leg." Wellington looks down and he says, "By gad, sir, I believe you have." So they cut off the leg, and an enterprising Belgian gets hold of it, this cut off leg. He builds a memorial to it, puts a fence around, and charges money to get in to visit the memorial of the leg. Isn't that a good story?
Michaela of St. Paul, Minnesota. I don't know how to follow that. Michaela of St. Paul, Minnesota asks, what qualities do you find yourself repeatedly returning to in your protagonists? Or put another way, what do you find to be the most interesting and enduring human characteristics?
Well, the thing that I'm still requiring of them is that they're alive. So
Minimum requirement, yeah.
Minimum requirement. So some people kill off everybody at the end. I've never actually done that. Maybe I'm working up to it, but no, I think that would be too depressing. So somebody has to be there to tell the story, no matter how dismal that story may be. So I think there's that, and I think I like them to be resourceful enough so that they don't just, flop down on the floor and give up. And that is helpful for a story, because if your character just flops down on the floor and gives up, then what else can happen?
It's a short story.
Very short. Yeah, they've just given up. Oh, well, what's the use? So the only person who's ever successfully written stories like that is Samuel Beckett. He's got quite long stories about people who have given up.
Do they have to be likable?
Do they have to be likable? Who's doing this liking of which you speak? Earthling. So what I might find likable, somebody else might not find likable. But you are not, stories and books with characters in them, they shouldn't be stories about your preferred roommate. The qualities you want in a roommate, and hello, old roommate, I know you're out there, Susan. So the qualities you want in a roommate are not going to make a very successful character in a book, because you want them to behave well all the time. And that's not what we wish of characters in books. Anyway, it wouldn't be true to life. So there is that part in a book where you might say, "Who ate my chocolate cake out of the fridge?" That isn't what you want an actual roommate to have done. Would you like to hear a good roommate story about a chocolate cake?
I think that means that's a yes.
He said yes. Okay, so these people, there were a group of them, kids, students, and one of their number, and they were pretty sure who it was eating the foods of the others out of the fridge. So they got a cake, they got a chocolate cake, and they iced it with X-Lax, and they put it...
Perfect.
I'm not giving you any ideas.
I'm just going to let that. How do I segue into the next question? Pause. Paragraph. Jerry W. of Dorchester, Massachusetts asks, how much training did you get to handle the flamethrower, and how did it feel? I don't know this flamethrower reference.
Okay, the flamethrower reference is this. You're one of the very few people on the planet who doesn't know what this is. Okay, it's a meme that you can find on dreaded social media. So if you look up Margaret Atwood flamethrower, if you look up unburnable book, so it was a group that came to my Canadian publisher with the idea that they would make an unburnable book out of special materials, and it would be a copy of The Handmaid's Tale that could not be burnt. And then I would try to set fire to it with a flamethrower. And they would film this. And I said, I think this is a great idea, but it has to be for something. You know, it can't just exist in a void. So we have to do it for something. And I thought we should do it for PEN America, which has been a very strong freedom of expression advocate. And I think they've been doing a great job in difficult times. So we were going to do it for them. And they did manage to make the unburnable book. It took them about 5 tries. The first 4 all caught fire. No, I didn't set fire to all of them. They had the one that was not going to burn. So then they set up the chute, and I had to put on this, fireproof clothing and great big oven mitts. And then they gave me the flamethrower. They were quite nervous about it. Just pointed at the book, just the book, Margaret. Okay, we've done the shoot. Give that back. So we did the shoot, and we put it up there we launched it at the PEN America Gala in New York, and people were wildly enthusiastic about it. But it had the following qualities. It was short, it was funny, it was visually spectacular, and it had a point. And that's why it went around the world in the way that it did.
What do you mean dreaded social media? I think you get social media.
I understand it a bit.
Yeah.
Not totally. Nobody quite understands it totally. And don't ask me about chatbots. Somebody said, so is a chatbot going to write a Margaret Atwood novel? I quoted Lord of the Rings, the movie, the part where the guy is running away with some rabbits attached to a sledge. I said, I'd like to see them try.
So you're binging that. We know that. Cassandra M. from Woonsocket, Rhode Island asks, what is your greatest source of inspiration when writing?
Wow. My greatest source of inspiration when writing a novel. So, what a question. I don't go by hours spent doing it. I go by pages written, because you have to have a quota or you're never going to get done.
Do you have a daily quota?
That's my idea. I don't always stick to it. My greatest source of inspiration is if I do my 3 pages, then I'll be able to goof off and do something else. Sorry, it should have been more inspirational.
And 3 pages, generally, how long does that take?
As long as it takes. Takes as long as it takes. Double spaced. Everybody here knows that if you make the typeface bigger, oh, it's cheating, but sometimes you have to cheat just a little bit with the typeface.
Abigail of Boston asks, how does it feel to see so many ideas from your dystopian fiction come true in real life?
Well, how did they get into the dystopian fiction in the first place? They got into the dystopian fiction from real life, because that's where those sorts of ideas come from. And with The Handmaid's Tale, I made it a rule that I wasn't going to put anything into it that hadn't already been done somewhere, sometime, by someone. So it's all got chapter and verse, and that was to avoid what would otherwise have happened. Oh, Margaret, you have such a twisted, weird, baroque, nutty imagination to make all these awful things up. I made none of them up, okay? Precedents for everything. Same with Oryx and Crake. I knew that I had a fairly high bar to jump. My brother is a biologist. He is a neurophysiologist. And I knew that, and he is in the habit of reading my books and correcting the typos. He's an older brother. And I knew that if I got stuff wrong, I would hear about it. He's a person of few words. Here's what he had to say. I think you did a pretty good job with the sex. But I'm not so sure about the purring. I had given these genetically modified creatures the ability to purr on the theory that cats purring is in part a self-healing ultrasound kind of thing. And science, since that time, has borne me out. We are told that if you have a migraine headache and you put a purring cat on your head, it will be quite soothing. I don't know how you're supposed to keep it on there.
I don't know how they collected data for that experiment.
Now, cats purr when they're happy and feeling cozy, but they also purr when they're injured and feeling threatened, by the way. Anyway, I think he's come around. My brother.
Well, coming back to the Handmaid's Tale and precedent, I'm sure many of us here know, but I'd like to ask you about how, is it Genesis 30? Is part of the framing of the purpose of the handmaids.
Well, the question you want to ask some people is, how literally do you mean when you say you take the Bible literally? I don't think they've read it. Do you?
They voted to ban it.
Yeah, well, so what you have in the part that's quoted at the beginning of the book, for a reason, you have two wives, and then you have a baby contest going on. And the wives enlist their handmaids, and the handmaids have babies which the wives then claim as theirs. So that is part of the structure of the actual Handmaid's Tale, very biblical.
And I want to ask you about the show on Hulu. Is one of the centers, I mean, this is Rachel and Leah, yeah?
Yes.
In the Old Testament, and one of the centers is the Rachel and Leah
As it would be.
Center. Yeah.
Yes, as it would be, yes, exactly. The Rachel and Leah Re-Education Center. Where did I get the idea of re-education, may you ask? Yeah, so there's a novel by Marge Piercy called Woman on the Edge of Time. She's very frank about it because the visitor from the past who's visiting the future says, what happens if people don't agree with you? And they say, well, we re-educate them. And she says, well, what if they still don't agree with you? She says, well, we kill them because we don't believe in the prison system. Oh. Very frank.
Yeah. What has your role been in the TV show?
You think I have a role in the TV show?
I see your name in the credits, don't I?
I know, yeah. Isn't that weird? Yes, I have a cameo in the first season. That's me whacking Elizabeth Moss over the head. We had to shoot it 4 times because she kept saying, come on, hit me harder. I said, no, I'll hurt you. Come on, give me a whack. So they added a sound effect in because I wasn't quite strenuous enough, apparently. Yes, so here's the real truth of how all that happened. There was a 1989 film of The Handmaid's Tale, which we actually launched just as the wall was coming down in Berlin. And we showed it in the West, and we showed it in the East, and the reaction was very different. In the East, they looked at it very intently, and they said, this was our life, meaning not that we had to wear funny red outfits, but we didn't know who to trust. You couldn't trust anybody. So in that contract, there was a section that had to do with a television series. This is 1989. In 1989, a television series would be Dallas, or it would be daytime soaps, like that. And I thought the likelihood of this ever being made into a television series is 0. So film happens, gets sold to a distributor. After a while, distributor goes out of business, assets are dispersed, the contract is lost to view. It's like the ring of power. It goes into the mountain with Gollum, and nobody knows where it is. And we didn't know where it was, and we had no idea who had this contract. So people would come and they would say, can we do something with The Handmaid's Tale? And we would say, we don't know who's got the contract. Oh. But then, just as series streaming gets invented, a beam of light came through a high-up window and shone down on a filing cabinet. MGM. And a psychic employee said to him or herself, this is a sign. No, I'm sorry, I made that up. They opened a drawer and found the contract that somebody had put in there, and they'd lost track of it themselves. And they thought, this might make a good series streaming television show right about now. And so they did a first pilot with one company, which I did not approve of. Why? Because female guerrilla fighters with their machine guns were going into battle with their tops off. And that didn't strike me as being at all believable. So I said, why don't they have their tops on? And they said, it's television. I said, that is not a good excuse. So that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then Hulu, which at that time was fairly down the ladder of streamers, being stuck with movies that other people didn't want to do, rolled the dice and threw everything they had into The Handmaid's Tale. They went straight to production. They didn't even do a pilot. Oh. And they hired as the showrunner a person who, when he was 19, had made a solemn vow that when he grew up, what he wanted to do was The Handmaid's Tale. So he was very, very well versed in it. He knew everything. And he talked himself into the job. And that would be Bruce Miller. He used to introduce himself when we were first promoting it by saying, Hi, I'm Bruce Miller. I'm the showrunner of The Handmaid's Tale, and I've got one penis too many. But, but he said, but I hired a lot of women, which he did. He said, I thought they would all agree with each other. She's very sweet. So we would have, phone conversations about this and that's about all the influence that I have. I did say at one point, don't you dare kill Aunt Lydia. Woo. I said, well, I wasn't going to. I said, well, you stuck a knife into her and threw her over the banister. I said, she'll recover.
It's television. Yeah.
Well, also, it's the Testaments. I was writing it right then. I couldn't have her killed off.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Is the Testaments, that story, going to be incorporated in the next season or a next season of the show?
Do I know anything?
Oh, you do.
Yeah, I do, but I'm not telling. So Anne Dowd, who's just such a nice person, she's such a wonderful person, and she turns herself into this other character. She came to London to help us launch the Testaments, and she walked onto the stage, and she was this wonderful person called Anne Dowd, and then something happened, and before our very eyes, she transformed into Aunt Lydia. I guess it's called acting. Yeah. But yeah, she does a bang-up job.
Oh my, yeah.
And she reads the Aunt Lydia part in the audiobook. She does. That's her doing it.
A couple more questions. We have a little bit more time. Leo from Southwick, Massachusetts asks, what has been your biggest challenge around censorship in your writing?
Ever? Around censorship. Well, I think just having to deal with all of these, and it's been a repeated pattern. I think Handmaid's Tale is the 13th most banned book in the United States. And it's usually people who haven't read it or have really misunderstood it. I fondly hope that is true. I fondly hope that's the truth. I fondly hope they're not actually wishing to install a totalitarian state and they don't want people forewarned. Maybe it's that, but I think it's usually, it's got shocking things in it.
How about translations? Have you had any issues? It's been translated into.
If you know, you never know if there really are issues because usually you can't read that language. But a long, long time ago, I did get a letter from a Chinese translator, and it said, what is this smile button? We know smile and we know button, but what is a smile button? So I had to explain that. And then they said, what is this granola? So, well, sometimes things just, you don't have the object in your world and you don't know how to translate it. But I have a great deal of respect for translators, and I have an essay about them in Burning Questions. And you are in their hands if you don't know the language. Yeah. I know enough French and German to answer those questions, but other languages, I really have no idea. And you have to rely upon the readers of those languages. They will usually let you know whether it's a good translation.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll let you know. They'll say, you need to get a better translator or something like that.
Two more quickly. Ruby P. from Cambridge asks, why do you think writing fiction as opposed to other genres comes more naturally to you? Is this, along with other meanderings on finding yourself as a writer, a topic you hope to get into in your upcoming memoir?
Oh, I can see I never should have mentioned that memoir. Yes, it will be about some of those kinds of things I expect. But I've always written everything that I write now. Ever since I started writing nonfiction prose, I started writing poetry, I started writing short stories, and I also wrote dramatic forms, which I did quite a bit in the 70s. I was writing screenplays and television plays at that time. Nobody told me not to. Nobody said you can't do all of these things. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to be a novelist, or you might confuse people about your brand. Okay, so I didn't know I was supposed to have a brand because when I started, there weren't creative writing schools, and things were much more seat of the pants in the publishing world. There wasn't a lot of soi-disant expertise about these things. So you just did whatever. I look at the early writing life of Ray Bradbury. He just wrote, whatever. He was a freelance writer. He just turned it out, whatever it might be. And I have a lot of, that resonates with me, because that's basically what I was doing.
This afternoon in the studio, you talked about a novel, if a novel is akin to a marathon and short stories are a sprint, which muscles come more naturally to you?
None of the above, because if I only were interested in doing one thing, I would just do that one thing, would I not? The thing that I do as a matter of duty, I would say, is book reviewing, of which I did quite a bit, and it's hard because you have to read the book attentively. If the person has written other books, I feel anyway, honor bound to read them too, or enough of them. In my case, I don't know what I would do. But it was the Red Cross theory that we want there to be book reviews, we want there to be blood transfusions, because someday you may need a blood transfusion. So if there aren't any blood transfusions, there won't be one for you. If there isn't any book reviewing going on, that when it's time for you to get your book reviewed, there won't be any book reviewers. So I felt that I needed to contribute to the pool of book reviews so that there would be a sort of, there would be a reserve. A reserve of reviewers. So to encourage the others and do my duty by the writing, quotes, community, an overused word, other writers. I reviewed a lot of books in the 60s and 70s and 80s because I just felt it was part of the job. But it's the hardest part. But then I got to review things people were not expecting me to review, like Stephen King and Elmore Leonard. I reviewed one of Elmore Leonard's books, and I put a footnote. It was for the New York Review of Books. And he wrote me a letter. He said, "Oh, Margaret, my friends are so impressed. It's my first footnote."
You're welcome.
He was making fun of me.
Last question here. Michael F. from Skokie, Illinois asks, what is your favorite way to procrastinate?
Oh, let me count the ways. No, yes, very shameful things. I have to stop playing online solitaire. It's very bad for me. So too much time on the crossword puzzles. Shouldn't be doing that. Should not be. Well, I've pretty much gone through them now. So I did all of Hercule Poirot, the David Suchet version, which is the best. Yes. The Miss Marple, it's the really elderly Miss Marple is the best one of those. And Midsummer Murders. Very murderous place. I wish to live anywhere near there. People are just getting murdered all the time. It's remarkable. That thing has been going for, what, 20 seasons? Yes, and with 2 or 3 murders per episode. It's amazing anybody's left alive.
Somebody is killing off everybody, yeah.
A very sweet series, the Father Brown series. It's very adorable. Not everybody, I think it's too adorable for quite a few people, but other people find it very comforting. Yeah, so somebody said to me recently, why do you do this murder watching? I said, it's extremely soothing because the people get caught. Yeah, we found out who did it. That's very comforting because in a lot of real life, we don't find that out. But if you were writing a murder mystery and we got to the end and Hercule Poirot said, I have no idea. You'd be very, very annoyed.
Yep.
Yeah, I like Inspector Maigret, but I don't like any television rendition of him.
My last question for you is, goes to an interview you did recently, and you were asked, what is it like being, you're over 80 now, is it fun being old? And your answer?
Yeah, more fun than you might think, if everything's in moderately working order. If you see what I mean.
Yes, yes.
Yes, no you don't yet, because you're too young.
But fun how?
Well, for instance, I can have fun with you.
Yeah.
I can flirt with you. Nobody's going to think anything of it. They're more
what's going to be on social media or what people think, I guess.
No. Yes, they'll just think I'm being cute to a younger man. Being encouraging to you. I'm helping you in your life path. Yeah, so at this age, you get a choice. You can either be a wise old woman or a wicked old witch. Those are Carl Jung's terms. And why not both?
Well, you've already done it. Thank you so much. Again, Margaret Atwood.
Thank you, everyone.